Hello. Grandma's going to continue chapter 5. Remember, he's being chased down from the volcano plateau toward his canoe. Now, if you hear noises in the background, Grandpa's working downstairs. You might hear some sawing or banging or stuff, but hopefully we can do this without too much distraction. He knew this trail as he knew the back of his hand. That knowledge gave him an advantage. He could hear his pursuers slipping, stumbling through the brush, shouting threats in a language strange to his ears. But there was no mistaking the meaning of their words. On the boy dashed, fleet as an animal. Thorns and vines clutched at him. Once he tripped and sprawled headlong, but he was up and away in an instant. Through the trees he caught a glimpse of white beach, and his throat surged. Then he was speeding across the sand, Yuri at his heels. The canoe was at the lagoon's edge. The boy fell upon the thwart, shoved the craft into the water. The logs under the stem rolled easily. In that second, the black men, yelling wildly, broke from the jungle and dashed across the beach. Not a minute too soon, Mafatu leaped aboard and ran up the sail. The savages rushed after him into the shallows. A gust of wind filled the sail. It drew smartly. Now the men were swimming. One of them, in the lead, reached to lay hold of the outrigger. His hand clutched the paru pole. The canoe slacked. Mafatu could see the gleam of bared teeth. The boy lifted the paddle and cracked it down. With a groan, the man dropped back into the water. The canoe, freed, skimmed out toward the barrier reef. The savages stopped, turned back toward shore. Then they were running back to the trail across the island, shouting to their fellows as they ran. Mafatu knew it was only a question of minutes until the whole pack would be aroused and in pursuit. But he had the advantage of a head start and a light craft, while their canoes would have to beat around the southern point of the island before they could catch up with him. If only the breeze held. Mafatu remembered then that the canoes he had seen drawn up on the beach had not been sailing canoes. There were strong arms to propel those black canoes, to overtake him if they could. Mafatu's canoe, so slim and light, sped like a zephyr across the lagoon. The tide was on the ebb, churning in its race through the passage into the utter ocean. The boy gripped the steering paddle and offered up a prayer. Then he was caught in the riptide. The outrigger dashed through the passage, a chip on a torrent. The wind of the open sea rushed to greet it. The sail filled. The outrigger heeled over. Mafatu scrambled to windward to lend his weight for ballast. He was off, homeward, homeward. Soon, rising above the reef thunder, the boy could hear a measured sound of savage chanting. They were after him. Looking back over his shoulder, he could see the dark shapes of the canoes rounding the southern headland. Moonlight shone on 100 wet paddles as they dipped and rose to the rhythm of the chant. It was too dark to see the eaters of men themselves, but their wild song grew ever more savage as they advanced. The breeze was almost dead aft. The crab-claw sail swelled smooth and taut, rigid as a block of silver against the sky. The little canoe, so artfully built, ran with swell and favoring wind, laying knots behind her. She was as fleet and graceful as the following gulls, but the eaters of men were strong paddlers with death in their hearts. Their Matu taboo had been profaned by a stranger. Vengeance powered their muscles. They were tireless. On they came. The wind dropped, imperceptibly at first. Sensing it, Mafatu whistled desperately for Maui. Maui, do not desert me, he prayed. This last time, Lend me your help." Soon the black canoes were so close that the boy could see the shine of dark bodies, the glint of teeth and flash of ornament. If the wind died, he was lost. Closer, closer the canoes advanced. Some of the warriors leaped to their feet, brandished their clubs, shouted at the boy across the water. They were a sight to quake the stoutest heart. With every second, they were cutting down the distance which separated their canoes from Mafatu's. Then the wind freshened. Just a puff, but enough. Under its impetus, the little canoe skimmed ahead, while the boy's heart gave an upward surge of thanks. Maui had heard his prayer and answered. Day broke over the wide Pacific. There were 6 black canoes, paddles flashing, now gaining, now losing. The boy was employing every art and wile of sailing that he knew. As long as the wind held, he was safe. He managed his little craft to perfection, drawing from it every graceless speed in flight. He knew that with coming night, the wind might drop, and then he forced the thought from his mind. If the wind deserted him, it would mean that Maui had deserted him too. But the savages would never get him. It would be Moana, the sea god's turn. The boy looked down into the blue depths overside, and his smile was grim. Not yet, Moana, he muttered fiercely. You haven't won, not yet. But with falling light, the wind still held. Darkness rose up from the sea, enveloping the world. The stars came out clear and bright. The boy searched among them for some familiar constellation to steer by. Should it be Mataiki, Little Eyes? Would Mataiki lead him back safe to Hikaru? And then he saw and knew. There, blazing bravely, were the 3 stars of the fishhook of Maui. Maui, his sign. Those were his stars to steer by. They would lead him home. In that moment, he was aware that the chanting of his pursuers had become fainter, steadily diminishing. At first, he could not believe it. He listened intently. Yes, there was no doubt about it. As the breeze freshened, the sound grew fainter each passing moment. The boy quenched his thirst, ate a scrap of poi, fought against sleep as the night waxed and waned. It seems like he's left his pursuers behind. Grandma loves you. Read you some more in a little bit.